When you hear the phrase or the term vulnerable leader, what comes to mind for you? What do you think of?
You have to be able to show that you're human. Vulnerability is a key aspect in that, and that's one of the things I think really good leaders can use. I almost want to say tactically, but it's both strategically and tactically because you can really build team alignment by showing that, hey, I'm open. I'm not perfect. I don't know the answer necessarily. There are times where you want to know the answer, but there are times where saying, I don't know what we should do here. What do y'all think? There's an aspect of it that I think, and I actually think it's an important piece of the big mix, like the character mix. And so there's an aspect of it that really goes to approachability, and in our company in particular, we're very focused on inclusion.
Hmm.
And on the idea that we want you to feel like you belong, a sense of belonging and a sense of inclusion. And if your leaders are, this sort of iconic, impossible to penetrate frame, you will not get authentic followership, right? And so you have to be able to show that you're human, uh, and vulnerability is a key aspect in that. And that's one of the things I think really good leaders can use. I almost want to say tactically, but it's both strategically and tactically because you can really build team alignment by showing that, hey, I'm open. I'm not perfect. I don't know the answer necessarily. There are times where you want to know the answer, but there are times where saying, I don't know what we should do here. What do y'all think? And you're
Yeah.
building engagement that way.
Mm. Any stories or situations come to mind of that you can recall when you were vulnerable with your team?
Yeah, I think the ones that resonate with me, particularly if you're in a learning culture, and that's really important. For example, we operate the largest clean energy power plant in the United States. It's Palo Verde Generating Station. It's a nuclear power plant, so it's got no carbon emissions, but it's the largest power plant in the United States right now. And you can imagine that operating that nuclear plant very focused on strong safety culture, strong learning culture. You've got to be
Yeah.
really good at what you do. The most effective leaders that help generate new leaders at that plant, and that plant's been operating since the 1980s, and so you got to build that continuity. The really effective leaders out there will, for example, share their mistakes. So, here's the situation that I was dealing with. I handled it completely wrong. Here's what happened, but here's what I learned from that. And if
Mm.
you're not sharing mistakes, then people learn by making mistakes, right? If you're sharing
Yeah.
mistakes, you can avoid somebody else having that same example. And again, what you show is that to somebody that, yeah, you're human, you make mistakes, it's okay, and it's okay to then talk about them and talk about what we can learn from them.
So where's the time, or can you think of a time when you had to do that?
Yeah, it was probably when we had um, well, I'll tell you the one that was just it was a kind of a legal requirement. I was working with a regulator, and so he was an elected Arizona Corporation Commissioner, and we were siting a power line, and we're supposed to put signage up on the power line corridor to let people know that there was going to be a corridor there, and we missed the signage, and I was the lawyer at the time for the company, and he was the chairman of the commission. I called him, and just like you just got to say we made a mistake. You could argue and say, well, there's this requirement, it wasn't clear, and we did this. But I remember calling him and just saying like, hey, I need to tell you about a mistake that happened, and shared that. Said on me, I should have been following up on that, and obviously apologized. But the interesting thing is then, I've continued to stay connected with him or talk to him periodically over the years. This was many years ago. That piece builds more trust. So like he knew then that I think he could trust me because I admitted that we made a mistake. And I
Yeah.
wasn't just coming in as the corporate, like, nope, we don't make mistakes. This is it. And so when you do that, and they're long-term relationships in almost any corporate environment, I think you have to understand relationships are built for decades.
Yeah.
And showing that sort of vulnerability early on, actually, I think I wasn't trying to do it. That was just kind of how I operate. And so, but when I shared that, I think, I talked to him a few years ago, and he remembered that and said, "Yep, I, knew I could trust you when you were doing that." And now I'm in a different role, obviously.
Yeah. So it was a power line. So you were supposed to label that there was going to be a power line there, and you forgot to do it?
Yeah, the team didn't do it, and so I was the lawyer on the team.
Yeah.
So again, I wanted to take accountability and say I should have come back and checked that we had actually done that, and nothing to do other than say you're sorry and move forward and fix it.
So why'd you decide to do that instead of just saying, "Hey, it wasn't clear. I didn't know. It was there. You didn't see it."
Yeah, I think it's just, particularly in a regulated utility environment, your integrity matters. You can spend decades building it and lose it in a second. And so that's just always been pretty core to me. I think I learned that in the Navy, is you got to own your mistakes. And like we were talking about earlier, mistakes happen. If you never have mistakes, there's something not right about you or your company, because that's just not how it works in real life. And so being able to own it and say we learn from our mistakes, we fail fast and fix it, that is going to create a better working environment than trying to maintain an illusion of perfection. And so if you're not emulating that, if you're not modeling that, you're creating, I think, you're not necessarily creating a safe space for your employees to feel like they can do that as well.